everyone. Welcome back to the Completely Fucking Clueless podcast. My name is Sarah Alice Liddy, and today I have a very special guest, a very wanted guest on this podcast. I have my amazing partner, Olivia.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
Happy
to be here.
Yeah, how does it feel? How does this feel?
Good. It's not what I'm used to, but...
I know. You're going to be on camera.
Yeah.
I know. I was like, when I asked you to be on camera, I was like, this is either going to be a yes or a definite no.
Yeah, I don't mind. You know, anything for the pod. So.
Anything for the pod. Well, there's been a lot of questions for you and for us about our relationship. I talk about our relationship quite frequently. What is that like hearing me talk about the relationship when you're like in your car listening to it on Spotify?
I like it. I think it gives me a little peek into sort of your mind and how you're thinking and feeling about me and us. So I like it. You know, sometimes it's funny.
I know. Sometimes I'm like, should I be sharing this? But then I'm like, anything for the pod.
Anything for the pod. Do it all for the pod.
Do it all for the pod. Anyways, I want to get into what your point of view on our story is. I've told the listeners our story like a bunch of different times, but I want to hear it from your point of view.
Yeah, so in 2011, we went to camp together.
Mm-hmm.
I was 13. I think you were 12.
Yeah.
You know, I had a crush on you eventually.
But what was your first impression of me? Because I remember asking you this, and you were like, I thought you were annoying or something.
I thought you were annoying. I was reading, this is bad, but I was reading over some old, like, journal entries. And and in the journal entry, I said, at first I thought she was a slut, which is so mean. It's so mean. I was reading it and I was like, wow, 13-year-old me is an asshole.
Like, at first, what gave the impression that I was a slut to 13-year-old you? Oh my God.
Maybe I didn't know what that word meant. And I was just using it willy-nilly, but like...
I feel like at the time, like those words were just like tossed around a lot more.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think I meant it as like preppy or like someone I wouldn't necessarily like.
Yeah, we were very different.
But...
Still are.
Yeah. And then like a week into camp of the 2 weeks that you were here, I realized I really liked you. I think I told a couple of one of your friends and a couple of the other like campers in our cabin, like, hey, I have a crush on Sarah.
Just in case anybody else was trying.
I guess so. I don't know. And then, and I don't remember this, but it's written down from a first person source, so I know it's true. First person source is me. We slept together, non-sexually, in the same bed for like 3 days.
That's crazy because I don't remember that. I do remember the last night, but I don't remember
and
the
on the
prior.
final night, the night before you were leaving,
sad tear.
We made out apparently for like an hour and a half. Again, this is all from my journal.
We love the journal is spilling the tea.
And I said, quote, it was intense. So. And then you left.
I'm dying.
You went home.
Yes.
I stayed at camp for like another month.
Yes.
And that was what I call our love letter era.
Yes, that was. Because I remember I had written you like, well, they had like some sort of portal like where you could write letters to the campers.
Like emails, basically.
Yeah.
And they would print out the emails and
give them to you.
us.
And you could like attach photos. And I remember sending you an email. And looking back on it, I really do think that my mom looked at what I was saying. Because I remember her being like, is Olivia just like a friend? And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, just friends. But yeah.
Yeah. And you sent a lot of like handwritten letters.
Yeah.
Too, or, like cards, notes. You confessed your love for me via a letter that I was reading this morning.
Oh,
not the first time you confessed your love to me.
Via a letter. I think I always do it via a letter or some sort of like internet letter. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I came back from camp and we had this like mostly long distance because we were 13
and 12
and we weren't going to be driving to each other's houses. We lived like half an hour away from each other. Which felt like on other ends of the world.
Right.
Like,
we're also so young.
Yes.
Like, I don't know what I was thinking at that time.
I know. Yeah, and then we crashed and burned because of mental illness. And we didn't speak.
Number other things. I mean, like,
sure.
I feel like at that time, at like 12 years old, I was so not ready to accept who I was. Like, it was not a question. I mean, I'm very open about being like, had my cute little young girl gay phase, and then at 15, I was like, that was so much fun. Like, that's over now. You know?
But it wasn't.
It wasn't. Fun fact, it wasn't over.
Yeah, and then we really didn't
talk at all.
I mean, until
you bombarded me at my high school.
Until 2014, when I moved from Connecticut, where I'd grown up, to Westchester, New York, where Sarah grew up. And through a complex turn of events, I ended up having to go to her high school for my senior year of high school.
That was like the scariest thing. Like, I'll never forget. And like, there was a complex way of me finding out, but I'll never forget, like, when I found out that you were going to come to my high school for a year, and I had done such a like good job at hiding everything, and I was like, here we go. My life is over. Like, everyone's going to know all my secrets, like, everything I've done to like hide who I am. It's over.
I can't understand how you thought that I had this much power and this much like malice towards you that I would completely uproot my family's life to come and destroy yours.
No. I did not think that you uprooted your family's life to destroy my life. But I was like, I guess like I was like out of all the high schools in Westchester, and now like I know the full story, like speaking with your parents. So I'm like, oh wow, like of course you had no other choice but to come to my high school. But at the time you're a selfish I was 16, 17 years old, and I was like, why the fuck are you coming to my high school?
Yeah. Yeah, but honestly, like that, my senior year, I was so done. I was like, I didn't care. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to take 6 regents and graduate. Like,
that's crazy. For reference, for the people, where did you go to high school, like before coming to my high school?
So I went to a private therapeutic day school in Connecticut. Connecticut does not have the same like standardized test requirements as New York does. So in order to graduate with a New York State diploma, I had to take essentially 4 years of standardized tests in 1 year, or I wouldn't have graduated.
Which is like crazy, because regents are just so silly and stupid. Like, I cannot even.
Yeah, and a couple of them were for classes I never even took.
I know, that's crazy, but you're a smart person, so.
Yeah, and then somehow, and I don't exactly remember how, but we started talking again. We were in the same gym class.
Oh, we were in the same Lifetime gym. Wow, and after everything, we were still in that class all year together.
Yeah.
Nuance, everybody, what you'll get in a second is, yeah, so we were together for, not together.
We weren't together. I was sort of dating someone else at the time.
Which I didn't know about.
So, I mean, it was like a very toxic on-off thing, so I don't really consider it real, but technically I was. And so we somehow became friends, I guess, where we would...
Called a truce.
Yeah, where we would hang out like after school, or
you had a blue Mini Cooper.
Mm-hmm. We would drive around. I remember we went to like a playground once. We went to like a coffee shop a few times. Like, we just we hung out a few times. And I remember somehow I was very big into Tumblr as a kid, and so
who wasn't?
Yeah. So I kept saying oh, I can't remember the name of your Tumblr. I don't remember what your Tumblr URL was. Do you still have it? And you're like, I don't know. I don't think I use it anymore. And you wouldn't tell me what your Tumblr URL was. And I was like, I gave up. I was like, okay, I'll never know what it is. And then one evening, you sent me the link to your Tumblr URL. And I clicked on it, and there is this long-ass... love letter.
I'm so dramatic.
Letter.
I love it.
Talking about, our past and our history, and I couldn't get over you. I still love you. Very sweet. And I have that as well saved on my phone. And I was like, cool, great. Happy to, okay. And then the next day, you started dating someone else.
Yeah.
A man. A gross, lanky, skinny man who I think was in my physics class. Who's just like not a nice person.
No, yeah. I mean, I think I think I've talked about this on the podcast before. At the time, I was just like not ready, and even though I'm sorry for hurting you,
it's okay. I mean, we've talked about it, and it doesn't. At the time, I think I chalked it up to like essentially what it was. Like, oh, she's not ready. Yeah, she's not comfortable with this. Like, this is the safe option, and she's gonna go with the safe option, And I understood that, and also I was like, I'm out of here. Like, I don't care. Like, whatever. I'm going to college, in the Midwest. Like, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then I graduated high school, went to college, and we really didn't talk the rest of the year.
No, I can't even believe we were in the same gym class. Yeah. Wait, I did not know that detail.
Along with a couple of your friends, too, like your current friends.
Oh, okay. Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
And and then we didn't talk at all while you were in college or while I was in college.
Well, I did drunk call you a few times.
Really? I don't remember this.
Yes, I drunk called you a few times in freshman year of college.
Did I have your number blocked though?
Maybe. No, but I feel like I left voicemails. I don't remember. I was like wasted. Like
nice.
But anyways, we really didn't talk until 2020 when you slid in my DMs with classic "Hey You Up" at 2:00 in the morning.
This story makes me look really bad. That's all I have to say.
You didn't say "Hey You Up."
No, I said "Hey, how are you?" But it's so and that like how I said it was just so unlike me.
It was like 1:30 in the morning.
I know.
So
had to take the liquid courage while I had it.
Yeah, and then we ended up small talking, and then we ended up big talking about some of the things that have happened in our past. One thing led to another, and we started like a long distance sort of.
You know what I'm thinking of? Did you ever watch the Naked Brothers band? Yes. Long distance relationships will kill you. That's literally it.
That was such a weird show.
I know. Okay, that pretty much lines up with my point of view. For most of it. So. Okay, cool. But now we've been in a relationship for 3 years, if anybody, or almost 3 years, if anybody is new to us and our story. And so we talk a lot on the podcast, as you know, because Audrey is single, who is the co-host with me, about, her dating life and stuff. But we don't talk a lot about, like, all the things that go into relationships. And so I thought having Olivia on today would be a good kind of time to talk about relationships in your 20s and how to navigate them and go about them. And so how has it been for you being in a relationship in your 20s? And have you ever like struggled with the whole idea and rhetoric sometimes that is passed around in the 20s decade of like, you need to be on your own and you need to like, what's that phrase? I'm thinking of a pond and fish, like test the waters or like get out all your options. I don't know. Everybody knows I'm not good at sayings.
Big fish in a small
pond. No, that's a whole other one. So forget it.
Yeah, I mean, before we started talking again in 2020, I was living in Boston. Yeah. And I feel like my move to Boston after college was sort of my way of like going out to find myself and like
in your 20s,
in my 20s, because I was like 21 I think when I moved to Boston. So I mean I think to an extent I experienced that, but at the same time I'm almost 26 now, and I feel like I'm more in a place where I'm like more certain about my life, or like what I want, the things I'm working towards, and I want to do that with you.
Thanks. That's so kind. I mean, I think like I don't know if I've ever talked about it on the pod, but I think something that I've struggled with a lot in our relationship was this like kind of idea and rhetoric of like, you should go out and be wild and like sleep with other people and date around, because I have never been a real serial dater. Like I've never been on like a first date where it's like I don't know the person. I've rarely used social media apps like for dating wise and stuff like that. And so I think when we hopped into our relationship, like it all of a sudden got like very serious, and I was like, oh my God, like this is like a real relationship, because prior, like all my relationships were sort of like really unhealthy and just like not rooted in a great place. And so I think it like scared me that I hadn't had, or I was like, am I supposed to have these experiences because that's what's like everybody else is saying or doing or telling me to do. Like I had like family members be like, you know, you should just date around and like figure out who you are and all these things. So it was definitely something I struggled with like at the beginning of our relationship. It's only something I've just I feel like gotten over the hump of.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with, you know, dating around or sleeping around.
Playing the field. That's what it is.
There's nothing wrong with playing the field.
Yeah.
Thank you. If that's, you know, if that's what you want, but I don't really see the point in forcing yourself to do that if that's not what's right for you, or if it means, you know, turning your back on something that could be right for you know?
Yeah, well, thank God for Meg J. Like, you have Meg J to thank. Like, the 20s guru.
Thanks, Meg J.
For getting me back in check, because something her book talks about, and, like, when we had talked with her, Audrey and I, you know, she was saying how a lot of her 20-something clients, like, don't, like, feel like they're not allowed to take their relationships in their 20s seriously because of this whole idea of like playing the field and dating around. However, you know, something she emphasizes is how important, and not saying like the person that you're dating in your 20s could ultimately lead to marriage, but it could. And she was like, so many people don't take the question of who you may marry someday very seriously until you turn 30, because it's like the whole idea of like, I'm going to do whatever I want, and then all of a sudden the deadline of 30 hits and I need to like have it all together and like have the person and the marriage and the life. But she like urged me, like, if I think that this is something that I can like see long term, that I should take it seriously, and it's okay to, and there's no like, you know, there's no shame in not having like been on a bunch of dates and like all of that stuff. Like I don't need that to be like, I really like our relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's like a necessary thing to do. I think if it happens, it happens, and that's great.
Yeah.
And if, you know, if you find someone and that works, then that's great too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you dated around in college, which we'll get to.
A little, yeah.
A little. I mean, I think anybody who's dated around, I'm like, you've dated around, because I really didn't. I've kind of been a serial monogamist, but I'm like, you've dated around. And so being like together in our 20s, what do you think are some of like the individual challenges that you've faced? Like even just being in a committed like relationship, you know, because I think this is the first relationship where I've ever taken like the things, like my individual challenges seriously, or realized that I had to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think something that I have struggled with in a lot of my, you know, significant relationships, not even just romantic, is like this idea of like, oh, if you know me, you won't like me. And so I need to either hide who I am or put on this mask or this front of who I think you want me to be, you know? And I think that was something I really struggled with, because, especially towards the beginning of our relationship, because, like, yeah, I liked you, and I was afraid that you weren't going to like me, you know, and I valued you and the relationship we had, and I didn't value myself. And so I thought that I needed to be someone worthy of valuing without really recognizing that I inherently have value in myself. You know? You know what I'm saying?
What do you think, like, what did you do to find that value within yourself?
I mean, I think it's something I'm still working on, you know. I don't think that's really just something you can, like, flip a switch and it's suddenly fixed. I think that's, you know, something that is a huge part of my life. But, yeah, I mean, I started saying affirmations. That's really helped. I do a lot of affirmations. I have
can you share some of them, or are they too personal?
No. Affirmations, I mean, they could be anything. They could be, I am enough is a big one that I say a lot.
Slay.
I am capable. You know, I am worthy, you know, I bring value to the relationships I'm in, something like that. I also have like apps on my phone that send me little, like random affirmations. So I think like combating the negative self-talk has been really important, and establishing like positive self-talk has been a helpful step in sort of building my sense of self-worth.
Yeah.
So that I feel like I have value just by being who I am.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I definitely think you do. I definitely think you do. I mean, I kind of talked about my, like, the 20s rhetoric challenge that I had, but I definitely think something that I, like, discovered this year, or, like, 2020, like, into 2023, was, like, kind of undoing some of the not, like, best behaviors that I had gained from previous relationships. And I don't think, I mean, like, we all know that, like, we pick up behaviors and thoughts and feelings from relationships that we're in, but I don't think I really realized how they were affecting me until we went through the break that we went through in, like, December to late January. And I think the biggest, like, bad behavior I quote unquote took up was not telling you how I feel. And I think this is something people struggle with all the time, because, I mean, even on TikTok, I see people talk about it all the time. They're like, you know, people can't read your minds and whatever. And I knew that, like, rationally, but in practice, I really didn't put it into use. I feel like there was, like, this period of, like, 3 months that we went through where both of us weren't really telling each other how we were feeling, and I thought I was doing, like, a service to you in our relationship by doing that. And I also think, like, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I thought that, I thought I was doing the right thing, and I think I thought I was doing the right thing because in my prior relationship, I had learned that, you know, not saying how I'm feeling kept me safe, which is so unfortunate. But, like, that was just the reality of that relationship, is I learned very quickly that if I had any thoughts or feelings, that they were just going to be met with a lot of anger and violence. And so I was like, let me put that down. But in our relationship, doing that got me to a point where there was a lot of anger and resentment, and I felt like, well, nothing can be done about this because it's already so great. Like, how are we going to fix all of these feelings? And so I just kind of, like, ran away instead of actually trying to address the things that I was, like, feeling. And that was really tough. And it was tough to, like, go through that period of time. However, it gave me, like, the biggest lesson, I feel like, and has put us in, like, a really good space, like, going through that really hard moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we as human beings develop patterns of behavior that protect us, right? And so I think that avoidance is a protecting behavior for you. It's to keep you safe from the unknown, or, like, a confrontation or violence or anything like that, you know, anything that you don't want to experience. And at the same time, that very same behavior is what causes the conflict, or at least exacerbates the conflict, and makes it so much bigger than it would be if you kind of tackle one thing at a time, you know, because when you let 3 months or however long of little things go unaddressed, suddenly it turns into this giant snowball, and it feels insurmountable. You know, and that's with anything. That's with relationships, that's with homework, that's with, you know, any sort of quote unquote responsibilities you may have. Like, if you don't tackle one thing at a time and you let them build up for however long, they snowball into this, like, really scary and impossible thing.
Yeah, it was hard. It was, like, not easy. And I remember the moment you told me, and it kind of, like, clicked, like, these behaviors that, like, once kept you safe are no longer keeping you safe, and you don't have to, like, use those behaviors anymore. And I was like, wait, that's so right. Like I'm doing this and I'm not even realizing I'm doing it. And now like we're at this point. Yeah, it was crazy. You're good at talking to people and working people through their things. That's why Olivia is going to be like an amazing like mental health professional, whichever way you decide to go, whichever way. But you know, I think we've obviously worked our way through it, and I think, what do you think are some of like the challenges we've faced together? So we've had our individual stuff. Like, what have we had to face together?
Yeah.
Obviously communication.
Definitely communication was a big one for both of us.
I feel like it's a big thing for everybody. It's always like, communication is key.
No one wants to talk about how they feel.
Why? Why do you think?
I think a large part of it comes from a lack of like language, and also like they don't have the words to describe how they're feeling, or they don't have, or they have certain learned like sentence structures that they'll say that are very accusatory or defensive, that aren't really getting to the root of the thing that's the problem. I also think there's like a taboo that still exists. I mean, it's getting better now, but like a taboo, like, my relationships need to be perfect all the time.
That's what I was thinking
of earlier.
Not,
I'm wrong and I'm bad, like, and so you fake it essentially in an attempt to fake it till you make it, but that doesn't work with human connections. That it breaks down.
Yeah, I think I felt that too a lot. Was like, I have to keep up this like idea of having like the perfect relationship, and like, relationships have to be like calm and cool, and like there can't be any disagreements ever, which is just like not the truth. And especially if you're growing together as individuals and spending many years together, like there's gonna be times where you disagree. Like that's just like so unrealistic to not think.
Yeah, and I honestly think having conflict or fights or arguments or whatever you want to call it, having those and working through them can make you a stronger pair or whatever.
Yeah.
It can strengthen your connection because you face this really hard thing and you get through it together.
Yeah. I think something I do with communication, we were talking about this last night, is like, because I'm so concerned with how the other person is going to feel about what I'm saying, I'll sort of like beat around what I like want to say. I'll like overemphasize that this person feels safe and like good about what I'm saying, but at the end of the day, I end up like sliding by how I'm actually feeling. And I feel like that's what I did for a really long time with us, was like, so not like we weren't communicating. We would talk about things. I mean, we talk about things a lot more now, and because like we'll get to, we've fostered that environment between us. But I think before I met everything with like at least with communication with like a very like poised way of saying it, like, this is how therapy has taught me to say this, and let me make sure you're doing okay, and let me not talk about how I actually feel.
But again, I think that was designed to protect you.
Sure.
To manage another person's emotional reaction to what you have to say or what your feelings are, to protect yourself from, violence, whether verbal or, something else.
Yeah.
Like, to protect yourself from their reaction.
Sure.
You try to handle it before it's even happened.
Sure. Yeah. I've always been that way, though. I've always been like a fixer, like a sew that button up kind of person. And I think something else that, like, a challenge before was that, like, the idea of we're not, like, opponents with each other, and that we're on the same team, which I thought was such... Did you say that, or did we find that somewhere?
I mean, that's a big thing. I remember, I think you sent me an article about a woman who was dealing with like very severe mental illness, and her husband and her like had to shift their mindset from like her husband being angry at her for being sick to the two of them being angry at her depression or at her OCD or whatever it was. I don't remember what it was. But being angry at, like, another third party, you know, thing, yes. Instead of each other.
Right, yeah.
You know, so it's shifting, like, a me versus you mentality to an us versus
whatever it is the issue mentality. Is. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that was really helpful, especially, like, from the phase of relationship we were at the time. Like, you were really struggling, things were really difficult, and I think, yeah, before I had read this article, I was very upset at you, but it's not, and then I read this article and I was like, wait, I'm not upset at you. Like, I don't want to be angry at you. Like, not even like your mental illness, but it's not me against you. It's like us against like what you're going through and how we can like work together to like help you through that.
Yeah. And I think that can be applied to lots of different things. You know, it can be applied to anything. Like, oh, you know, I work so much, I don't have time. And so instead of being like, I'm angry at you because you're working all the time, be like, I'm angry at your job because they make you work all the time.
Yes. Like, I was angry at your job at the time.
Yeah, but shifting the blame, so to speak, from one another to this other enemy that you can both face hand in hand. Like, together.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Do you have any couple challenges you want to bring up that you think we've gone through?
I think something that's been hard has been valuing our individuality and independence while still prioritizing the relationship. You know, I think that's been, is not so much now, but I think that has been a problem in the past, is like, how do I balance, you know, my life and my personal time and everything like that, while also valuing the relationship and being there for the relationship.
Yeah, it was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. I feel like I find, at least with you, not with many other people, actually with almost nobody else, I like have this weird, I've definitely talked about this weird thing about me that I've had since I was a kid, where Monday through Thursday, like, no social things are allowed to happen in my life. I literally remember being in elementary school and somebody asking me for a play date, and I was like, no, you can ask me on Friday or Saturday, but like not during the week. And that played a role for a while in our relationship, especially when you had a job that had you working on the weekend. I found it so hard to like switch this. Mm-hmm. But I think something that's helped me with that and just like opening up more time to us is realizing that I don't have to be anything for you. Like I don't have to like be on. I can literally just sit on my phone and scroll TikTok side by side with you, and like that is fine. And I think we've been pretty good like at communicating like, hey, like I'm exhausted today. Like either I want to see you, but like I'm just going to be exhausted, or like, hey, I need to like go home. Like last night.
Yeah. You know, I think it's trying to find, like, recognize that being together can be restorative.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a social drain.
Right.
You know, like, we don't have to, just because we're hanging out doesn't mean we have to go out to dinner or, like, go get drinks or plan something.
Yeah.
We can just, like you said, lay in bed doing our own thing.
Yeah. Watching James Charles. Exactly. If you know, you know.
Yeah, so shifting that I think has also been important.
Yeah, because it, like, I think, and was it in, like, when we got back together in January, like, when we were, like, we're trying to build a life together? Because I think, like, I remember talking about this, because I feel like we had gone through a lot of stuff in the fall, and it felt like our lives were, like, I always said this, I felt like our lives were, like, parallel to each other, and I wanted them to, like, cross over more. And so I feel like in the last couple months, like, you know, hanging out, like, whenever, like, we have time or space for each other, like, no matter if it's between Monday and Thursday, I feel like our lives are a lot more, like, together than they are, like, parallel.
Yeah, and also I think, you know, when one person is really drained, the other person can sort of pick up pick up the slack, you know, like something that we really never did until recently is like, I'll go over to your house. Right?
Yes, that's true. We spent a lot of time at Olivia's house, which was for an important factor that finally is over, but like.
Right. But I think also that made it hard on you because you're not in your own space. You can't get comfortable. You don't have your things.
Yeah.
Like,
and I told that to... I'm like, do I say it? My parents were annoying, and we're growing up in the 1950s, and we're like, we don't want you and your partner sleeping at the house, not because they were homophobic, because they were like, thought I was like a child and hadn't had sex before, and I'm like, you've known I've been having sex since I was 16, okay? And I finally was like, I need to be able to sleep here, like, because we're always at your house, which I love, and your parents are so welcoming and nice. But you're right. Like, sometimes I just felt like I just want to be in my space with you. Yeah. So that's been a lot easier.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
For sure.
And so making it more of a balanced give and take, I think, has been important.
Yeah.
Too.
Absolutely. And then I wanted to touch on, before we get to some listener question things, because I feel like we have enhanced our communication to a really great point, and I truly feel like I can basically tell you almost anything and everything. It may take me like 24 or 48 hours. Our recent like moment where I was like, it took me a second, but it does get there a lot quicker than like 3 or 4 months. Like what we've done to foster communication between ourselves.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the cards were a big
Yes,
factor.
I will put this in like the episode description, or I'll also put it like on our Instagram. Olivia got these like great couples cards. Like they're different.
They're conversation
yeah.
cards. Yeah.
And like those are so good to do. Because it just gets you talking.
Exactly, yeah. So they're like open-ended questions that range from like superficial to like deep to spicy, like. And so you can kind of choose, like, do we want to have an in-depth conversation or something light?
Yeah.
Right? And I think using that to facilitate communication when we were both not good at it was really helpful, because then it normalizes talking about stuff. Yeah. And makes it easier to then have more natural conversations, or the questions would lead to more conversation.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, I said that. I also said, especially when we first got back together after taking a month apart in January, we did a lot, and we haven't done it as much recently because I just feel like we've been better at checking in with each other in general. But if you're struggling with your partner with communication, we had these like couple check-ins that we would do where we would talk about like how we think we're feeling.
So the couple check-ins would be, what was something good that you liked in the last week? We would have them, you know, relatively weekly. And what was something that was good? What was something that wasn't so good, or that you have kind of lingering? How do you feel about the things that we addressed last week? Have things changed? Have things gotten better, gotten worse?
Yeah.
Like, how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, that was really helpful.
Yeah. I think, again, just like creating space to have uncomfortable conversations, at least until it's normalized and you get better at it and you're more comfortable to just do it naturally. I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, and then I think also from communicating with each other, we both sort of started to realize like the individual things that we were struggling with that held us back from talking with each other, and kind of and I think if you are in a relationship you care about, you dedicate yourself to working on yourself to benefit your relationship. Mm-hmm. Because I started talking about things I didn't want to talk about in therapy.
Yeah, me too, you know. Like, I think you have to... You know, a relationship is kind of like a mirror. It holds up a mirror, and...
Wait, I heard that recently. Somebody else said that recently.
Someone you love that loves you is going to... My sister says, is going to trigger the fuck out of you. And so, you know... And that's okay. That's good.
Sure.
You know? That means, you know, that they're... a family member almost.
Yeah.
You know, a family member is going to piss you off, is going to like push all your buttons, make you angry, and so is someone you love, you know? And so, yeah, relationships are kind of like a mirror. They point out all your kind of hang-ups, all the things you haven't addressed, all the things that you need to address, because it's such an intimate relationship.
Yeah.
You know? So definitely individual therapy was important as well.
Yeah.
You know?
All right, guys, now we're going to get to some listener questions because I told this to Olivia. This is the most listener questions we've ever received. There was so much positive feedback for you coming on the pod, so you're loved by the peeps. But something that the people want to know, because I think I've talked about it a little bit, is you were a dater back in the day, and you do give my friends great dating advice. And so I want you to, because I do think you have a very special approach to it, explain your approach to dating. Or just like, you know.
So, what I always tell you and your friends is that essentially everyone wants to be chased. Everyone wants to feel wanted. They want to feel special and beautiful or whatever. They want to feel wanted. And so when you pursue someone, when you actively kind of openly pursue someone, you invite them to like you, essentially. Yeah. Obviously, if they don't like you, they're not going to like you. Right. You can't necessarily change that, and then you need to back off. But, if someone seems interested, but they're not telling you, that could be because rejection is really scary.
Sure.
And saying how you feel to someone you barely know is really scary.
Yeah.
And so when you, as the chaser or the pursuer, take on the burden of risk of rejection, you open up the floor for the other person to willingly, allow themselves to like you.
Yeah.
Basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I know you're always encouraging my friends to do a little bit more of the chasing.
Yeah.
Especially, people who identify as women, it's a whole thing about being the chased one.
So there's this, fairly accurate stereotype in the women-loving women community, which is that two queer women will stare at each other across the bar for 4 hours and then leave and never talk to each other. And that's because they're both waiting for someone to
make the move,
quote unquote, be the man.
Yeah.
Or make the first move.
Yeah.
But neither of them will ever do it. So if you take on the role, I'm going to make the first move, if they like you, they're going to respond to that.
Yeah.
And they're going to respond positively. Again, if they don't like you,
back
off.
Consent.
But if you're making eyes across the bar for 20 minutes, go over and talk to them.
Period. All right.
Just go. If they are haha, my friends are here, and they walk away, okay,
right.
Bounce back, go talk to someone else.
Bounce back.
Another thing I wrote here, I think it's important not to, I know that everyone is afraid of rejection, and it's really hard not to be, but I think it's important to not fear rejection from people who don't know you and whose opinion of you really doesn't matter.
That's true.
This is a stranger at the bar. Chances are you're never going to see them again. If you do, you're never going to talk to them again. So if they reject you, who cares? Why does it matter? Why do they matter to you?
Beats me.
They don't.
But I had it pretty easy here.
If you get rejected, sure, it's going to hurt. But then, I guess don't place so much value in a stranger's opinion of you.
True. That's a really great piece of advice. How do we balance work life and our relationship? I think we've been open about it this time throughout our conversation. It just took a lot of time to figure out. I had some boundaries that weren't helping the work-life relationship balance. And, I think we're just better at communicating about, when we're free, or when we've had yesterday you texted me in the morning, we were supposed to hang out last night, and you were like, hey, I didn't sleep well last night, I'm stressed out, you have finals, I need to go home after work. And I was like, coolio, and just being honest about it.
Yeah, I think, respecting, my needs, respecting your needs, and respecting the needs of the relationship.
Sure.
Prioritizing, personal rest and restoration, prioritizing your needs, and, if you need rest or if you need to hang out, And then prioritizing, like, what does our relationship need? How, have we not hung out all week because we're both individually stressed? Like, maybe we need to reconnect just for an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's hard. I think it's taken practice.
I mean, we're almost like on year 3, and I feel like we've just kind of gotten it and understood, and and things like work and flow. Like, Olivia wasn't working full time like a couple months ago, so you had so much time to give to me and like work around me, and now you're working again, and like we have to and then you have to find that balance with each other. So yeah, just talking about it. What has it been like dating a podcaster or somebody that puts their life on social media?
It's fine.
It's fine.
I mean, it's not for me, but like, it makes you happy, and that's all that matters. Like, I want to support what you like.
Yeah.
What matters to you. So
slay. And then quickly, we're just gonna get into some questions about you and your gender identity, because that was a lot of questions that some people had asked. So how old were you when you started questioning your gender identity?
Yeah, so for people that don't know, I identify as non-binary.
Oh, sorry. We usually say pronouns at the beginning of this podcast.
That's okay. I use the pronouns he and they. Yeah, I guess around 11, 12, 13 is when I sort of started thinking about that, probably because puberty was happening.
Sure.
And suddenly I was like in a body that I hated, and that wasn't right. So yeah, there were instances in middle school where people would, refer to me with like feminine references.
Yeah.
I was emo in middle school.
Yeah.
And there was this friend of mine who would call me Shemo.
Okay.
She emo.
Yeah.
I freaking hated that.
I feel the anger.
Oh my God. But I couldn't say anything
Right.
because I didn't know why I hated it. I just didn't like it.
Right.
First of all, it's stupid and sexist, but whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah, and then when I was 13, I had a very traumatizing experience with my therapist. Totally other story. That sort of pushed me back in the closet for a good 5 years or more, 10 years.
Yeah. And then what's initially had sparked for you, like, the thoughts around questioning your identity, and how did you navigate those thoughts?
Yeah, again, I think it was puberty, and just dysphoria. And then I think the older I got, the harder it became to ignore.
Sure.
I think throughout my adolescence, I really just pushed it down and was like, kind of like you with sexuality.
Yeah.
You were like, nope, we're not going to deal with
right.
this.
And then the pandemic came and I had so much time to think, and I was like, what if I wake up at 50 and regret this? And like, I couldn't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, kind of the same.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it happened in college, and even then it was a very slow road. But, getting more exposure to the queer community, especially the trans community in college, was really important because suddenly I was like, hey, this is actually an option. Like,
right, because you have a lot of friends from college that have experimented and changed their gender identities, and so I think like surrounding yourself with that probably was impactful.
Absolutely. I think, again, like especially because a lot of my trans friends are trans men, and so realizing like, hey, you can be born a female and that you don't have to be that.
Yeah.
Was really important, I think.
Yeah.
In sort of, just seeing it as an option.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, the way I navigate the sort of uncomfortable or uncertain thoughts is, at this point in my life, thinking about it, talking about it, and playing with it or experimenting with it. Like I said, for a long time, I think I ignored it, pushed it down, denied it. But bringing it really to the forefront of my own thoughts, and then the conversations I was having with my friends, with you, with my therapist, has been very helpful in sort of understanding them better or accepting them better.
Yeah, Yeah, I agree. I feel like I've seen like a huge like evolution in you since we started dating again in 2020 when it comes to like your gender and how you express yourself and talk about it and clue me into it. Because for a while you didn't.
Well, you were slow to warm up.
Okay, sure. Yes, I was slow because like
I didn't want to bombard you.
Sure.
Because you were already sort of teetering on. It took you a minute.
It did because I think I had this impression of you from like when we were younger, and I was like, I'm having such a hard time transitioning over to that. But then once I made the switch, and I've said this to you so many times, like I can never look at you like how I used to, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I can never look at you that way. And when people refer to you in the wrong pronouns, I'm like, I like don't even know who you're talking about. Like it's just like not the person that I've come to love at this stage in our lives, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, last question for us is how to find queer spaces. This person like said specifically for women, but I think we can talk about it like more in a general sense.
Right.
I'm bad at this. I'm going to say it to you right now. This is a part of my queer journey that I need to get better at.
So I thought about this question, and the thing about, I don't know where the listener that asked this is from, but there's not a lot of lesbian bars in the country.
No, we're lucky. We go to a place in the city a lot, and that has been done a huge wonders for me with myself and finding community and trying to put myself out there to like meet other queer friends and stuff, but definitely I've been slow. Tracks.
And there's just not a ton of options if you don't live in New York City.
Like what are you supposed to do?
Or a major city.
Like what if you lived in like
really
North Carolina?
Not a lot of options. Yeah, there's not a lot of options.
Yeah.
So one option is to research like your local queer community centers. There's a really big and cool one in New York City. There's one in Westchester that I attend support groups at sometimes. They're all over the place. You're more likely to find a community center than a queer community center than you are to find a lesbian bar.
Sure. I think there's like 20.
Yeah, gay bars, those are kind of a different story, but they're not super. They don't cater to queer women, really.
Yeah.
Or even femme presenting non-binary people. They're not super.
Yeah.
They don't cater to that. Population. So queer community centers are definitely a big thing. They host like really cool free events, support groups, AA meetings, if that's what you're in need of.
And even like looking things up on TikTok, like we got served like something on our FYP for this brand in the city. It's called, I'm going to call it a brand, but it's called Grotto. And they recently did a pop-up at the Ludlow House for like queer women, queer people in general, though I feel like. And now they're doing one I know it's like in Williamsburg and then somewhere else. It's like at a beer... like what are those called? Beer garden?
A
brewery, there we go. I believe it's in Williamsburg, and they're there on Wednesdays and Sundays, but also like kind of like using TikTok to your advantage in that way. The women the couple that owns it are lovely, and they make amazing drinks. So
yeah, and then my last piece of advice, which I wrote here, if you make one queer friend, you could make 20 queer friends. Because, and again, it's partially about chasing, it's about you make one friend and then you say like, hey, I'd love to meet some of your friends, and chances are some of their friends are queer, and so then you go to their friends and you buddy up to them and you say, hey, I'd love to meet some of your friends, and it expands out like a tree.
I love that. I need to do that.
Yeah, so, bars, community centers,
TikTok,
online online platforms, and socializing, and kind of like with dating,
putting yourself out there a little bit,
and not being afraid of rejection, because it's gonna happen. That's the tea. Okay.
That's the tea.
You have value, even if they don't see it.
Aw.
I didn't mean to point to you.
You have value. Babe, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
This was so fun. I'm so proud of you on camera. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Completely Fucking Clueless, and on TikTok and YouTube at Completely FCKING Clueless. We'll see you guys next week, and don't forget to be fucking clueless. Bye.
Follow me on LinkedIn.
A LinkedIn shout out. I didn't give you a time to promote your socials because you don't like people.